and you truly understand that what you've got is right for your business. Does everybody feel confident about that?
No.
No. Okay. Why?
Because, depending on, when and by whom that platform has been procured, it may be something that you've kind of inherited.
Yeah.
It may be something that's been, essentially being tested but has never really been fully deployed. It may be something that's kind of, not actually fit for the job, but sort of does part of it. And I think, especially as it sort of tech's moved away from the IT department to anyone who's got a credit card, can sell a subscription, it can become more fragmented.
So that triggers an interesting point. So when people know that they need to do some changes to performance, what are the barriers to that happening? Any thoughts or reviews? What's stopping people actually developing and getting it right-sized or fit for purpose within your business? What sort of things do you think get in the way?
People not liking change.
People not liking change, yes.
They know the system they've already got.
Exactly, comfortable with what they've got. What else?
Budget. It's ownership.
Budget, ownership. So who said ownership? Yeah.
Because just from what Tim's saying, if you procured something or someone outside of technology has bought the app or the service, they've moved on with the business, they've fixed the problem there and then. 2 years later, if you've grown, if you've expanded, you need to change it. That person maybe did a different role or didn't really own it in the first place. They just bought it to solve a problem. So I think ownership is key. And even in a traditional environment, to find an owner for an application after 3 or 4 years is no one wants to know.
Yeah. That's right. I'd like to build on that. I was doing some consultancy in Russia back in 2012, and the company I worked for developed, I wouldn't say certificate IT tool. It was like everybody starts out with Excel, don't they? This unbelievable Microsoft Excel sheet called the Opportunity Tracking Tool. Very powerful tool, used globally. And the consultancy we're doing, the Russians were so interested, they wanted to actually buy it from us, and we actually translated it to Russian. What we found was when we went to the US, it was designed by one person, and that was it. And if that person had keeled over, that would have been the end of the whole thing. And it's quite interesting how many things start off in Excel and get developed somewhere else, and I'm sure, again, Ian will have experience of that. And I was at an IoD Advanced presentation in London about a year ago, and there was a guy there, his sole job was to debug things in Excel. He made a fortune consultancy sorting them out, because I read a stat somewhere that the loss to gross domestic product globally from mistakes in Excel was something like $11 billion, because things get translated from one place to another. So again, this is sort of the context you need to understand. There are other questions, like where do I get help? I'm not going to talk about AI and that, because Ian's going to be talking a bit about AI. But this is an interesting one here. Is your approach from a value base or a fear base? What do you think I mean by that, anybody? Your approach to digital and IT?
Well, the presumption that you should have a snazzy system and everyone's got one.
Yeah.
And you fear of missing out on what everybody else has got.
Absolutely. How many people actually fall into that trap, the fear of not having the latest tech, right? Without really analysing, is it fit for purpose, and that's what you actually need. I see a number of people nodding there. If you come from a value base, because in other contexts, I quite often talk to my clients about, are you coming from a fear base or a value base? What's the probability that you're going to implement it properly if you come from a value base versus a fear base? Yeah. Actually, there's some empirical data from the psychology that says it's 5 times more likely that you're going to deliver on something if it comes from a value base rather than a fear base. Thank you. So, a bit of data. I'm sorry, I do apologise that these charts are a bit small. I took these from a business presentation in Norwich a few months back. But if you look at UK productivity gap with the G7 nations, right? You can see the base is 100. Look at the gap here in terms of productivity, right? Okay. This is GDP per capita, which is gross domestic product per head, which is quite often just a macro metric. Sometimes these metrics you have to be very careful with, because you have to stratify them. There's data for this region as well, to make sure you fully understand the data, but it's a good comparison. The more scary thing here, this is, it says here the UK's productivity goals. This is an index of GDP per hours worked. That was the trend that the UK was on. When do you think that was? 2008 global crash, yeah? And you can see quite a downturn there. And look, it's a slow climb up, but we're still not at the same rate of acceleration we were before, right? And if you look at the gap is still, if you look at this, if that was the trajectory, in theory, the gap is widening. Now again, I don't want to be a doom monger because of course that assumes a straight line there, of course, and we don't know in reality whether it would have been a straight line. But what it does is presents a conversation around understanding the importance of productivity. And again here, if we look at firm productivity, right, it's very difficult to read here, but this is in percentiles. This is, again, the figure is labour productivity, this is £1,000 per hour's worked, right? So at the high end, you've got £96,000 per hour's worked. And the median is just here. So look, right, these are actually negative, right? So that look at how the lump of the curve here on the long tail, where we really truly lag in terms of productivity. And with the digital age and everything going forward, it's a huge opportunity, but it's also a challenge and a wake-up call for the UK to be more productive. So that's just a bit of context. So, and I said as a sophisticated country, and we still are. You know, as Tim's presentation earlier said, you know, we've got some great stuff going on in this region, elsewhere, Edinburgh, etc. But we're lagging behind in management practices. We're sort of, as it says here, 6th globally and 5th amongst the G7 members, which really is our comparison cohort. I was at Make UK conference in London back in February, and they had the head of the Chartered Management Institute there, CMI, was talking about that. And the truth is, we're one country that don't get trained as managers at all, right? Germany has huge educational programs about training managers. And I'm working in a consultancy job with some associates in the Middle East at the moment. And it's actually, for a very successful company, their management practices are very, very dire. And we've got another guy in from Powerful Consulting who's actually looking at that. Some people are never even taught how to hold a meeting, believe it or not, right? And actually how to engage with people. It's quite sad in some respects. So where does that fit in the digital world? Well, if our management practices are not up to speed, are we likely to embrace digital? Are we going to engage with the right people? Are we going to have a performance culture, right? So these are contextual but very important. So the good news, right? Data below shows the managing your digital portfolio. So these are the positive impacts, right, of these different elements. So if you look at cloud computing, if you actually fully embrace that, that's an increase in productivity of 13.5%. Who here in their businesses has cloud computing? That's roughly about 60-40, okay? And what are the benefits of cloud computing for the people who are actually using it?
Very, very low capex, low upfront cost. It's all done on a rental basis.
Okay.
You don't worry about servers or anything, that's all done for you. It's just
Okay.
no accessibility, constant updates.
Yeah, constant updates.
Access
Access
it everywhere.
it everywhere, exactly.
So
Assuming you've got Wi-Fi. Has everybody seen that? Is everybody familiar with the Maslow pyramid? Yeah. Have you seen that one at the bottom with Wi-Fi? Yeah. Okay. Fundamentals. Web-based accounting software. More and more people are going that way now, and there's like an 11.8% benefit. HMRC has driven a lot of that, and you'll see the advertising on the television. Okay. Computer-aided design, 7.1%. All right. By the way, has anybody used CAD in their lives of business? Excellent. Okay. Matt, is CAD developing a lot at the moment? I've lost touch with CAD. I mean, I know it moved to things like SolidWorks and stuff like that.
There has been some really interesting breakthroughs in using AI, so you can place certain things in certain locations and just say, go, you figure it out.
Right.
And then it will come back with 1,000 examples, whereas it would take a human, trial and error over thousands and thousands of hours. You now say, I need that part there, I need this part here, and I need it to be able to handle this much weight. And you just say, go away, go sort it out, and it'll come back to you with literally thousands of designs you can pick and choose from that will all structurally be safe.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because when I grew up and did my engineering courses, you didn't waste time accessing data. What you did, you spent a lot of time finding the data that you needed, right? And being very precise about what you used because computing power was very, very expensive and you had to be very focused. What's going on in the world now is that you don't need to do that because computing is relatively cheap and the power is so great, is you can let them do all the heavy lifting and the work and you don't worry too much about the wasted data. So thanks, Matt, that's very powerful. CRM systems, right, 18.4%, that's a huge increase in productivity. Again, hands up, who's using CRM systems? Yeah. I didn't until about this year actually. I actually was a laggard unfortunately and actually purchased the CRM system and actually beginning to see the power of it. But as somebody who's running a small business on my own, it's the time I have to invest to understand it, that's the thing. For bigger businesses who've got support functions, it's a bit easier. Right? And again, e-commerce, 7.5%. So again, huge opportunity, right? Question is everybody really using it? And the adoption rate, unfortunately, a lot of people say with technology is always lags behind the actual technology and the functionality. I think we had an IoD Suffolk talk over at Marshall about a year or so ago, and the guy was there heavily involved in the Sky Digital and setting up the set-top box, and he said the functionality available in that box was way beyond the capability of the individual to embrace what it could do. So that's something else we have to be wary of. I took this from an MIT Sloan paper because I was doing a bit of research on digital transformation. Here it's got the 9 elements of digital transformation, and they ran a survey with a number of CEOs, and they had quite a few responses. And they put it into 3 different buckets. One is transforming the customer experience. So that's, here you've got customer understanding, growth, and customer touch points. Very important to be customer-facing business. And also actually for other businesses. Then there's the operational processes. This is more the grunt element. This is performance management, work engagement, and process digitization. And then business models here. So all of these elements are key. Now, a lot of these people who are interviewed were CEOs of very, very large businesses, right? But interestingly enough, when you read the article, what it says is, even with the access to resource, they were only ever able to focus on 4 or 5 of them because it's huge, right? So this gives you an idea of the whole digital landscape. And the key takeaways that came out of this was, is it requires strong leadership, right? We talked about barriers to putting digital in. If you're not going to be passionate and you're not going to be strong leadership, you're going to really struggle. I don't know how many digital projects fail, but I'm sure there's quite a lot of failure there because people don't have the patience and results to do it. Visioning is very important, and then also being very focused on what needs to be changed. So I just thought this was quite useful to look at your business and break it down into these different areas and really determine what you need to do your digital transformation. So again, this is some thought-provoking questions, and we're going to do a bit more of this in the workshop. But as a business leader, do you actually know what your digital systems are, or have you actually delegated it to the IT department? It was interesting what I was saying earlier on about people now, we're all our own digital people because we've got access to phones. I mean, how many businesses have IT departments? So you're basically the business owners and operations director of, you said you've got an IT department. So typically what do they do these days?
Well, everything.
Everything.
I mean, it runs the business now.
It runs the business. Okay, that's very interesting. Okay. So again, just some questions here. Think about your functionality and what you actually need. Okay. Are you having to deal with too many digital systems? I'm just picking out one of the questions here. Right, who feels that they're having to deal with too many digital systems? I know we had a, thank you, Ian. I know we had an internal debate in IoD about the use of Slack once before, right? And how many different tools there are. I don't have Slack at the moment. It just seems to be, WhatsApp seems to be the weapon of choice for the environment I'm working at the moment. And again, do your staff fear the implications of going digital, right? Job replacement, right? There's been a lot of talk about that at the moment, about digital taking away, automating jobs. And yet I've actually seen lots of reports that also said it just means that people are going to move, particularly in manufacturing. They're just going to have to shift their skills into a different area. Doesn't necessarily mean there's a replacement of the job. And I went to an HR conference in London a couple of years ago, and they had the event, I think he's moved on, the then CEO of John Lewis Partnership and Waitrose was talking about difficult conversations with staff. Waitrose were the last people to put in automated tells instead of manned tills. And they were smart enough to have the conversations with the people. They said, look, right, technology is coming. The tills are going to be, your tills are going to be replaced by an automated system. So you really have a choice, right? If you want to stay part of the John Lewis Partnership, you can upskill and move into a different end of the team, right? Or sadly, we may have to lose you. And that's another thing that people need to think about. Thank you. in this area. So, and again, the other thing which we touch on is investing in appropriate training. I know that's dear to some people's heart. I mean, do we really invest as much money in training as we really need to do, and are we investing in the right training? And has anybody ever stopped to think about, have you thought about the return on investment? You know, you spend a lot of money, I can see some nods over there, on digital platforms and systems, but does anybody really sort of do the calculations? It's not always easy to do those calculations either, but it's just a thought provoker. So, I said I'd make some manufacturing references, I'm about to round up now. How many people are familiar with any of the Toyota principles and lean thinking? Okay. They came up with what they call the 8 wastes, which is defects, overproduction, waiting time, I'll come back to not engaging employees, transportation, incorrect inventory and motion, excess processing. I quite often do automotive examples for each of these, and it's a way of getting people thinking about where the waste is in the business and how they can be productive. But I thought about the data transfer side of it and working in the digital environment. About 4 years ago, I was working with a colleague in Geneva, very bright guy, and he was responsible for knowledge management. And they were moving away from a web-based platform for the repository of the data to SharePoint. And he rang me up one day and he said, John, he said, I'm going to do all this transition, it's huge, and I don't want it to fall over. How do you think I should approach it? And I said, well, let's approach it from a lean 8 waste perspective, right, and look at everything. So defects, dirty data, inconsistency or clashes, right? Overproduction, producing more data than is required, you know, you can create a fog, okay? Slow systems, little or no training, that's the engagement piece. Ineffective use of networks, data clusters not in the right place. Do you see, these are all things, I can see Ian nodding over there, the gun. These are all things that can trip you over, right? Or trip you up. But if you start looking at it from a slightly different perspective, you can start to drill down into your digital productivity, if that makes sense, okay? And then finally, excess processing, which is, in the automotive industry, that's putting more bolt holes in a cam cover or putting more bits on a car that you don't really need to do because it burns out tools and everything else. Here, it could be just unnecessary complexity and too many processing steps. So I'm just going to finish up now and leave you with the final thought, which is a lean thought here, okay? And I love this quote. This came from a Honda executive. Lean is the piece of work your customers are truly only want or pay for, the value-adding piece. So think about that in the business, right, with all your systems and everything. Thinks about what does your customer really want, okay? So I use the, and particularly around here, it's very rural. If you take an automotive oil filter, and let's say it's a tractor filter with a farmer, right? What does he really care about? When he buys that filter, right, the oil filter for his tractor, what does he truly care about?
It filters you.
Yeah, it filters the oil. What else does he care about?
It
lasts long and how cheap it is, right? Does he care about the packaging it comes in, right? Does he care about the way it was made, right? Does he care about what sits in the background? Absolutely not, right? And that is another way of starting looking at digital data with a lean mindset. Think about what your customers really want. I mean, there are other, and all the other systems that we call our fat, okay? Sometimes, yes, you do need them to do the business, right? But think about how much fat you actually need. And I say there's a caveat here. There are commerce and industry areas where actually the packaging is very important. Things like perfume and high-end luxury goods and stuff where the packaging is very important. So you have to think about it. But try and think with a lean mindset around what you're doing with your digital stuff, right? It is very important, but think about how you can trim it down and make it fit for purpose. So that's me. Thank you very much indeed.